Zach Elliott at Feel Free to Argue, and going to try to be making some more videos here in the future. I think I'm finally together enough physically and voice-wise to do videos, mentally too. That was an important part of it, just not having the ability to focus on anything for weeks on end, feeling like I was, I don't know, mental defective. But in any event, been catching up on reading some of my backlog of New Yorkers. Found a really interesting article. If it's still available, I'll try to post a link to it up in the sidebar. But the basic premise of the article was looking at our widespread practice of isolating prisoners. Not just like in places like Gitmo, but that's basically what all these supermax facilities that are popping up across the country are supposed to do as well. And approaching this whole notion of utilizing isolation for whatever purpose as torture. He makes several really good points in the course of this article. One of the primary ones is he looks at the experience of people who are not prisoners but who have experienced the same kind of situations. Looking at, for example, prisoners of war and even ones who received horrific torture, talk about how their periods of isolation were much harder to deal with than anything else, including the physical torture. And this was the thing that was worse about their period of, being incarcerated, I guess. Also, he looked at the experiences of an American journalist who had been kidnapped and had been kept in, isolation for a long period of time in Palestine. And it was interesting to hear this guy talk because, here's somebody who starts off with a lot of advantages that, people as part of your general prison population, what they don't have. He has an education, he has a lifetime of good health leading up into this. Probably availed himself of psychological services if he needed them. Probably in better mental health than most of the people who end up in prison. But the point is that when you take this person, this advantaged person, and you put him in a situation where he's isolated, he's put in a small room with barely enough room for his cot and a place to stand next to it, he experiences the same kinds of disconnects, the same kind of psychological problems that prisoners in a wartime situation and prisoners in a civil situation experience, like prisoners in a supermax facility, and namely a sense of losing your mind, losing your mental acuity. He talked about just simply forgetting all these things that he had spent his life kind of accumulating knowledge, and here just as part of the ramifications of him being in isolation, he could just literally feel his mind slipping away from him. He would, and despite the fact that, he knew he could get in severe trouble for this, even get killed, he could not prevent himself from flying into rages over stupid things, like, when one of his captors would come in and step on his cot, he would just flip out at him. And it wasn't that he didn't know that the guy could just turn around and shoot him or put like the butt of his gun in his face. He knew that, but he found himself unable to stop. And when psychologists look at the people in our prison populations, they find that one of the things that isolation does is it tends to focus people's attention on revenge fantasies and makes them prone to bursts of irrational anger. Um, so it's interesting in the sense that this is exactly the kind of behavior that we're trying to curtail, ostensibly, by putting these people into these supermax facilities. Now, why does somebody go to a supermax facility? Because they're regarded as being the worst of the worst, a discipline problem within prison. But what all the evidence indicates is that when you take these people and you put them into a supermax facility, you're actually making the problem worse. You make them more obsessed with revenge, and you make them more prone to outbursts of anger. And so it becomes another thing like torture, where we continue to do this for some ostensible reason, where it is demonstrably shown that it doesn't solve for this problem. In fact, that it actually worsens it. So, why do we continue to do this? Well, because we have this culture in this country which undergirds this whole idea. Because the one thing you can't afford to do as a politician in this country, something that's like unquestionably one of the third rails of American politics, is you cannot afford to be seen as being soft on crime. And the second anybody breathes a word about maybe these supermax facilities not being the best idea in the world, not being the best thing since sliced bread, that is when the whole weight of this no retreat, no soft on crime crowd comes down on these people. And it's a huge political liability because it continues to work with us. Because it works with the American people. Because they're not willing to acknowledge that there may be another way besides this, whole punitive idea that we've got going. So what about, the way it's presented, once again like torture, as being a necessary evil. So if we don't do this, what do we do? It's very simple. We can look to the example of other countries, something else that we refuse to do. England, when it was having, in the height of its, sort of conflict with the NRA, had its prisons totally swelling with these people. But they found out something that we didn't. They found out that this punitive model with ever-increasing isolation was making the problem worse, the problem of troublesome inmates. So they totally retreated from this idea, and they said, okay, we need to try something else, something that actually works. And what they ended up coming up with is finding out that these people who were most likely to be problem inmates in their system, what they needed was more freedom, more opportunity, not less. That if you gave these people a chance to, get rewards with better behavior, and you gave them some interaction with their fellow human beings, that they would improve and they would become better inmates and maybe even become productive members of society. And it's so frustrating because we have these tendencies in this country, and it keeps us from doing things which are sensible. And that's depressing when ideologies get in the way of the best answers, as they generally do, because ideologies are inflexible. So this is just another example of us in this country with our rigid and inflexible ideas about punishment actually, cutting our nose to spite our face. But as always, you can feel free to argue. And it's lovely to be able to say that again. Feel free to argue. Have a good day, everyone. Be talking to you more soon.